You believe you are a leader because the people around you smile, nod, and execute your commands without friction. What pathetic, arrogant naivety! You are not looking at loyalty, you are looking at domesticated cowardice. Beneath the pristine surface of every polite smile in your organization, your family, or your social circle lies a dormant, festering resentment. Human beings are, by their very nature, repulsed by authority, even as they submit to it. They do not follow you out of love. They follow you out of a temporary, agonizing lack of alternatives. The moment you show a fraction of vulnerability, the prey will attempt to become the predator. They will whisper in the shadows. They will form factions. They will plot your descent into the abyss. Waiting for a rebellion to organically reveal itself is the strategy of the weak and the blind. By the time you feel the cold steel of the knife, it is already buried to the hilt in your back. A true sovereign does not wait for destiny to dictate the terms of their survival. A true sovereign writes the script. If you want to know exactly who is waiting to betray you, you must hand them the very weapon they desire, loaded entirely with blanks. You must become the architect of your own faux destruction. Welcome to the zenith of orchestration, the Judas consensus. This is not a maneuver for the faint of heart, the morally paralyzed, or those desperate to be genuinely loved by the masses. This is advanced psychological warfare, delivered as classified intelligence from the dark architecture of human influence. The Judas consensus is the art of secretly financing, orchestrating, and leading a fake mutiny against yourself. By manufacturing a safe haven for treason, you lure genuine dissidents out of the woodwork. You map their networks, you document their grievances, and just as they believe they are about to overthrow you, you pull the floor out from under them. You emerge not as a paranoid tyrant who purged his ranks, but as the benevolent savior who stepped in to rescue the ecosystem from the brink of total chaos. You will wield absolute leverage while your enemies thank you on their knees for the privilege of their survival. Before we descend into the mechanics of this operation, wire this into your psychological framework. Drop this affirmation in the comments and carve it into your mind. I do not fear the shadows, for I am the one who casts them. I am the architect of the abyss, and my enemies are but actors in a play they do not know I wrote. To expose a traitor, you must first fund their treason. The foundational illusion of this consensus requires you to understand that if you do not build the resistance, someone else eventually will. By creating the rebellion yourself, you dictate its limits, its timeline, and its ultimate, spectacular failure. You maintain total sovereignty over the opposition. Look back into the freezing, blood-soaked shadows of 1920s Moscow. Between 1921 and 1926, the Soviet Cheka, the secret police, executed a masterpiece of deception known as Operation Trust. They set up a fake anti-Bolshevik resistance organization called the Monarchist Union of Central Russia. Genuine anti-Bolsheviks, foreign intelligence agents, and exiled aristocrats flocked to it, believing they had finally found a unified ally. The Soviets secretly funded it, encouraged its growth, and used it to identify, lure in, and quietly eradicate thousands of genuine threats. You must engineer your own Operation Trust. Select a highly trusted proxy within your ranks, someone perceived by the group as slightly disgruntled but fundamentally loyal to you. Instruct them to begin voicing subtle, calculated frustrations about your leadership. They are the honeypot. They will act as the lightning rod for all the hidden static electricity in your organization. This mirage relies entirely on absolute cold-blooded compartmentalization. If your proxy is discovered to be your pawn prematurely, the illusion shatters. As your proxy begins to plant the seeds of dissent, your instinct will be to argue, to defend your ego, to crush the whispers immediately. Suppress that urge. Silence is your enemy in this phase. Articulation is your leverage. You need to hear the whispers of the abyss to map the psychology of your prey. In the 1950s, the Solomon Asch conformity experiments demonstrated a terrifying reality. Individuals will agree with a clearly wrong majority out of sheer social pressure. But Asch found a darker corollary that is the absolute key to your operation. If just one single Confederate goes against the majority and voices dissent, the subject's conformity drops by a staggering 80%. Your proxy is that single dissenting voice. Their engineered bravery will act as a psychological skeleton key, unlocking the hidden cowards and emboldening them to speak their true, treacherous minds. Direct your proxy to host private conversations, off-the-record dinners, or encrypted group chats. Their job is strictly to listen, nod, and validate the complaints of the targets. They must document who complains the loudest, who offers logistical support for the mutiny, and who silently observes but does not object. But whispers in dark rooms are merely the prologue. Talk without action eventually dissipates into apathy. Opportunists only join a coup when they believe victory is an absolute, undeniable certainty. You must manufacture a tipping point to draw out the pragmatists who are safely sitting on the fence. Elizabeth Noel Neumann's spiral of silence theory proves that people aggressively suppress their true opinions if they feel they are in the minority, but they will rapidly vocalize them when they perceive their side is gaining undeniable momentum. You must artificially inflate the perceived momentum of the mutiny by orchestrating a controlled, highly visible loss for yourself. Allow your proxy to publicly challenge a minor policy of yours in a meeting or a social gathering, and you, playing the role of the weakening, out-of-touch leader, concede to them. Let the proxy win a small, symbolic victory. The French philosopher Michel Foucault famously warned that visibility is a trap. By making the proxy's success visible, you are setting the ultimate trap. The blood in the water will trigger a feeding frenzy. Those who were neutral will suddenly align with the proxy, revealing their opportunistic, parasitical nature. You are feigning a flesh wound to draw out the sharks, but you never surrender structural leverage, financial control, or access to critical information. With the momentum seemingly shifting, the net begins to tighten. Petty revenge is for the emotionally fragile. Total systemic purification is for the sovereign. You do not just want the loudest voice, you want the entire root system of the dissent. In the 1930s, the psychologist Jacob Moreno developed sociometry, the quantitative method for measuring social relationships. By asking group members who they preferred to associate with, Moreno mapped invisible webs of influence, identifying the hubs of connection and the isolated nodes. Using the intelligence gathered by your proxy, you will construct a literal sociogram of your reality. You will identify the instigators who actively plot, the enablers who fund or support them, and the sycophants who simply follow the scent of perceived power. As the 17th century architect of statecraft, Cardinal Richelieu chillingly observed, "Give me 6 lines written by the most honorable of men, and I will find an excuse in them to hang him." You are gathering the lines. You are building the dossier. Do not let your ego intervene. Hearing people you trusted call you incompetent or tyrannical behind your back will provoke a visceral, blinding rage. Kill it. You are a scientist observing bacteria in a petri dish. Emotion is the enemy of leverage. When the map is complete, the hammer must fall with blinding, ruthless synchronicity. Dragging out a purge creates an atmosphere of prolonged paranoia where the remaining members unify out of a shared survival instinct. The transition from perceived weakness to absolute, terrifying strength must happen in a single, unescapable instant. Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin understood the cold, mechanical poetry of the purge better than anyone, noting that to choose one's victims, prepare one's plans minutely, slake an implacable vengeance, and then go to bed, there is nothing sweeter in the world. Look to the sweltering heat of Baghdad on July 22, 1979, for the ultimate historical masterclass in controlled demolition. Just 6 days after taking the presidency, Saddam Hussein convened a massive assembly of Ba'ath Party leaders. Cameras rolled, cigarette smoke hung thick in the air. Suddenly, a prearranged traitor who had been secretly tortured and broken took the podium and read off a list of 68 co-conspirators sitting right there in the room. As names were called, guards physically dragged the sweating, pleading men out the doors to be executed. The surviving members in the room, terrified out of their minds and desperate to prove their loyalty, were forced to form the firing squads. It cemented Saddam's absolute, unquestionable rule in a single hour. You must spring your trap with the same administrative finality. You call the summit, the board meeting, or the family gathering. You present the exact, undeniable evidence of the mutiny. You expose the instigators instantly, stripping them of their titles, their access, or their social standing in one brutal stroke. You do not argue, you do not debate, you excise them completely from your ecosystem. But as the dust settles and the room breathes in the shock of your sudden power, you must execute the most critical psychological pivot of the entire operation. You must never break character. If they know you orchestrated the entire psychological operation from the start, you will be viewed as a sociopathic monster, and trust will be permanently broken. You must appear as the deeply betrayed, heavy-hearted leader who was forced to take draconian action to save the collective. The Schachter-Singer two-factor theory of emotion reveals a beautiful flaw in the human mind. The theory proves that human beings experience physiological arousal like panic, fear, or a massive spike in adrenaline, and then frantically look to their environment to attach a label to that emotion. By plunging the room into absolute terror during the purge and then instantly shifting your tone to calm, forgiving reassurance for those who survived, you hijack their nervous systems. You force their brains to misattribute their sheer, unadulterated terror as intense gratitude and relief toward you. Speak to the enablers and sycophants who remain. Soften your posture. Tell them you know they were led astray by manipulative bad actors. Issue a blanket, magnanimous pardon. Frame the purge not as a defense of your own ego, but as a tragic, heartbreaking necessity to protect the group's future. You become the savior who rescued them from the very mutiny you secretly funded. Let them pity you for the betrayal you suffered, while they thank you for your mercy. True sovereignty requires psychological subjugation. You cannot simply return to the old, relaxed way of operating. The survivors have stared into the abyss of chaos. You must now institutionalize their dependence on you as the sole source of stability. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard wrote that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. You gave them the freedom to rebel. They experienced the dizzying, nauseating anxiety of its consequences, and now they will gladly, eagerly trade their freedom for your authoritarian order. Martin Seligman's brutal experiments on learned helplessness involved subjecting dogs to unpredictable, inescapable electrical shocks. Eventually, the dogs completely stopped trying to escape, even when the door to their cage was left wide open. They simply lay down on the electrified grid and accepted the absolute control of the experimenter. By demonstrating that any secret plot against you will inevitably, almost supernaturally, be uncovered and destroyed, the subjects learn that resistance is futile. Implement new, highly structured protocols under the guise of preventing future tragedies. The survivors, traumatized by the suddenness of the purge and immensely grateful for your forgiveness, will enforce these new rules upon themselves. They will police each other. They will become your most fanatical loyalists, bound to you by a trauma bond they cannot even begin to comprehend. Never repeat this operation with the same group. It is a nuclear option, a one-time psychological reset. Used twice, the veil is pierced and you become predictable. A predator is only feared when its angles of attack are invisible. Look at the architecture of the world around you. The most enduring empires, the most untouchable corporations, and the most feared social dynasties were not built on the fragile, crumbling foundation of mutual affection. They were built on the ruthless, calculated manipulation of human weakness. The Judas consensus forces you to step outside the pathetic constraints of conventional morality. It demands that you view your ecosystem from the cold, sterile vantage point of the abyss. You are no longer participating in the politics of your group. You are playing God with its psychological weather. You summon the storm, you direct the lightning, and you gracefully hand out the umbrellas when the deluge is over. Let the weak pray for loyalty. You will engineer it. Drop this final affirmation in the comments. I am the architect of the storm. I control the chaos, and in the aftermath, I alone dictate the peace. Save this intelligence, study it in the dark, execute it without mercy.